You open your eyes to the sound of bells. Not one, not two, all of them. Every church in the city is ringing at once, a single voice of bronze echoing across the Bosporus. It's not a call to prayer, it's a farewell. The air is thick with smoke. Not from battle, not yet, but from candles, thousands of them. Every home, every chapel, every palace window flickers as if the city itself were praying. The walls tremble. Somewhere beyond them, the sound comes again, deep, metallic, rhythmic. The Ottomans are testing their cannons. Each blast rolls through the streets like thunder across marble, shaking icons from the walls and dust from the ceilings. You push open a window. Below, the city stretches like a dream from another age, mosaics gleaming, domes catching dawn light, the Golden Horn glimmering with anchored ships. But beyond the harbor lies a darker horizon, the enemy camp. Tents like a sea of white cloth stretching to the hills, banners fluttering, torches glowing even in daylight. A world of order and power staring down a city of faith and memory.
This is Constantinople, the last echo of the Roman world.
For more than 1,000 years, it has stood between two continents, guarding the crossroads of history. Now, in May of 1453, it is surrounded, its empire reduced to walls, its emperor reduced to a soldier, its people reduced to prayer.
You step outside. The air smells of wax and salt and iron.
O Lord, hear my prayer, and let my cry come unto thee. Have mercy.
The streets are filled not with soldiers, but with citizens.
May the Theotokos
priests,
guide our
merchants,
steps.
mothers clutching children, all moving toward the great cathedral of Hagia Sophia. Inside, the mosaics shimmer with fading gold. Icons of saints stare down at faces full of fear and faith. It's the last service of a dying empire. No one says it aloud, but everyone knows. Outside the city, a new world waits. Gunpowder, strategy, youth, ambition.
Move those kegs faster! We need the powder at the bombard now!
Sultan Mehmed II, 21 years old, commander of one of the most advanced armies the medieval world had ever seen, prepares to erase a civilization.
The siege has lasted for weeks. The defenders are outnumbered 10 to 1. Their walls, once invincible, now quake under cannon fire. And their emperor, Constantine VII, stands not as ruler but as symbol, the last Byzantine, facing the end with dignity.
A distant roar shakes the air. The earth trembles beneath your feet. You look toward the walls and see the dust rise. Another section hit, another crack in history.
You open your eyes in a dying city, and for the first time in 1,000 years, Rome is about to fall again.
For more than 1,000 years, Constantinople stood like a fortress against time itself. Empires rose, kings fell, dynasties burned, but this city endured. Born as Byzantium, reborn as Constantinople, it became the jewel of the Eastern Roman Empire, the bridge between East and West, between faith and empire, between memory and survival. At its height, it was the heart of the known world. Its walls, triple layers of limestone and brick, crowned with towers, had repelled Persians, Arabs, and Crusaders. Its scholars preserved the writings of Greece and Rome, while Europe drifted through its dark ages. Its cathedrals glittered with gold mosaics that captured light as if heaven itself had lent it. For centuries, Constantinople was not merely a city, it was a statement that civilization could survive chaos.
The empire that had once ruled the Mediterranean had long since fractured, reduced to a sliver of its former glory.
By 1453, the Byzantine Empire was little more than Constantinople itself, a city-state surrounded by Ottoman lands. Its population dwindled to less than 100,000. Yet, despite famine, debt, and isolation, it refused to surrender its identity.
Politically, Byzantium had outlived logic. The Western world, Catholic Europe, watched from afar, torn between sympathy and rivalry. For centuries, the schism between Orthodox East and Catholic West had left wounds deeper than any wall could repair. Papal envoys urged unity. Merchants from Venice and Genoa traded loyalties for profit. But when the cannons began to fire, the West stayed silent. No armies came, no fleets arrived, only prayers crossed the sea, and prayers, as always, arrived too late. Meanwhile, beyond the walls, the Ottoman Empire had grown with purpose and precision. Founded from the ashes of the Seljuks, expanded by generations of disciplined sultans, the Ottomans had transformed warfare itself. They were not raiders or horsemen. They were an organized, bureaucratic machine powered by faith, engineering, and ambition. And at its center stood Mehmed II, the 21-year-old sultan who saw himself not merely as conqueror, but as heir to Rome itself.
To Mehmed, Constantinople was more than a prize. It was prophecy. For a century, Ottoman rulers had dreamed of it.
And now the empire possessed what no invader before had: gunpowder, logistics, and a new vision of destiny.
The Sultan had built the fortress of Rumeli Hizari on the Bosporus, cutting the city's lifeline to the Black Sea. His fleet blockaded the Golden Horn. His engineers, led by the Hungarian cannon master Orban, constructed bombards so vast that they shook the earth when fired. Monsters of bronze capable of hurling stone balls the size of a man's chest. Constantinople had faced sieges before, but never an assault that could unmake its very walls. And yet, the Byzantines refused to flee. Led by Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos, they prepared to fight a battle everyone knew was unwinnable. The emperor walked the ramparts daily, side by side with his soldiers. Not in robes, but in armor. He wasn't defending an empire anymore, he was defending an idea. That faith, duty, and honor could still mean something in a world ruled by cannon smoke.
History often forgets that empires die long before their cities fall. But Constantinople lingered.
Even in decay, it refused to surrender its dignity. The empire that had once ruled the known world became, in its final days, a symbol of what endurance truly means.
And so, by the spring of 1453, the stage was set. A city of saints, soldiers, and scholars faced an army of youth, power, and ambition. The old world braced for its final dawn, the last stand of Rome.
Point out the weakest point in their defense here on the map.
Sultan,
While Constantinople
the eastern
prayed,
wall
the Sultan
seems
planned.
vulnerable to our new
Across the
cannons.
Bosporus, in the Ottoman camp, the world was being rewritten by a man barely in his 20s.
Chronicles
His
mention
name
a weakness
was
here.
Mehmed, son of Murad,
Right there with the
descendant of
Grand
Osman, the 8th Sultan of a
Hungarian
rising
route is
empire.
clear.
But history
The
would remember him by
artillery
another
here
name,
gives us better
Mehmed
range.
the Conqueror.
Agreed. We press the attack at dawn.
It's easy to imagine him as the enemy. Young, ambitious, relentless. But Mehmed was more than a conqueror.
He was a scholar, linguist, engineer, and strategist, a man raised on both science and scripture, who saw conquest not as destruction,
but as fulfillment.
From his earliest years, Mehmed had been obsessed with Constantinople. He had studied its history, its walls, its defenses. He had read Roman chronicles, studied Alexander's campaigns, and memorized the routes of every failed siege before him. To him, the city was not just a fortress, it was an inheritance. At 21, his ambition was vast but precise. He believed himself destined to unite the worlds of Islam and Rome, to end the division of continents and faiths, and to forge a single empire spanning sea and stone. To his soldiers, he was not merely a ruler, he was prophecy made flesh, the one who would finally complete what generations had begun.
His father, Murad II, had been a warrior king who ruled with caution. Mehmed, by contrast, was fire contained in steel. He restructured the army, modernized siege warfare, and centralized authority in a way no Ottoman ruler before him had dared.
Under his rule, the Ottoman army became a mechanism of precision. Its backbone was the Janissaries, elite infantry raised from childhood, trained in discipline and loyalty to the Sultan alone. They marched not for plunder, but for purpose. Around them, the rest of the imperial forces gathered. Cavalry from Anatolia, engineers from Hungary, artillery specialists from across Europe. It was not an army of a single people, but of a single idea. The future belongs to those who build it. Then came the weapon that would change history, the bombard. Forged by the Hungarian engineer Orban, this cannon was a miracle of its age. 27 feet long, capable of hurling stone projectiles weighing over half a ton. It took 60 oxen to move and hundreds of men to operate, and when it fired, its echo rolled for miles. The sound of the medieval world ending.
Where earlier kings saw walls as obstacles, Mehmed saw them as equations, problems to be solved by science and patience. His siege would be a blend of calculation, faith, and psychological warfare, as much about breaking will as breaking stone.
Forward! March!
Mehmed's camp was a city of its own. Tens of thousands of tents arranged with mathematical precision, supply lines organized like arteries feeding a living empire. At its center stood his pavilion, marked by the crescent banner, surrounded by scribes, scholars, and soldiers. Each morning, prayers were said. Each night, new strategies were drawn by lamplight, sketches of towers, angles, and bombard arcs. And in those plans lay more than military ambition. They carried the vision of a man who refused to inherit the world as it was. He would remake it in his image. The fusion of ancient Rome and rising Islam, a new empire born from the ashes of the old. At dawn, the earth began to shake. It wasn't an earthquake, it was the future announcing itself. For the first time in recorded history, a city, the greatest city in Christendom, was under bombardment. The age of stone walls was ending. The age of gunpowder had begun. The Ottoman cannons, vast and heavy, fired day and night. Each shot left a pause in the air, the silence before impact, the second when time itself seemed to hold its breath. Then came the explosion. Thunder breaking against marble, smoke rising, fragments of history falling into the streets.
The siege began on April 6, 1453. Mehmed's artillery opened fire from multiple positions, their trajectories mapped by engineers. The largest cannon, Orban's bombard, could only fire 7 times a day, but each impact was catastrophic. Walls that had defied 1,000 years of invasions began to crumble in weeks. They're breaking through the walls!
Inside the city, every sound became a prophecy. Children learned to read the rhythm of the guns. When the booming grew closer, people ran to the churches. When it stopped, they waited. knowing the silence meant the next shot was being prepared. The defenders, under Emperor Constantine XI, worked tirelessly. Every night, by torchlight, they repaired breaches with wood, rubble, and even tombstones taken from cemeteries. Women carried stones, priests offered blessings, and old men joined the walls with crossbows. Constantinople, once the beacon of faith and learning, had become a fortress stitched together by desperation.
Incoming! Take cover!
The defenders numbered barely 7,000. Greeks, Italians, and mercenaries.
They faced an Ottoman army estimated at over 80,000. Yet the city's ancient walls, first built by Emperor Theodosius, still gave them a chance. These were not ordinary fortifications, 12 meters high, reinforced by a moat and inner barrier. They had stopped every invader before.
For weeks, the rhythm continued. Impact, repair, prayer. Each day bled into the next. Famine crept in, disease followed, and yet morale held. Not through hope of victory, but through pride. For every man on the walls knew he was defending more than land. He was defending the last living piece of Rome.
From the Ottoman side, it was not slaughter, it was mathematics. Every shot recalculated, every angle adjusted.
Mehmed watched from his pavilion, recording the progress of destruction with the precision of an engineer.
As days became weeks, breaches began to open. The defenders countered with sorties, daring night attacks where small bands of soldiers struck the enemy trenches, sabotaged cannons, and vanished into the dark. For a time, these acts of defiance kept the balance, a handful of exhausted men holding back an empire through sheer will. Then came the turning point. Mehmed ordered his fleet, over 100 ships, to bypass the chain blocking the Golden Horn by hauling them overland on greased logs. It was an impossible idea that worked. The defenders awoke one morning to see Ottoman ships floating inside the harbor that had been their last sanctuary. The city was now surrounded by both land and sea.
God protect my family.
And so the cannons continued, night and day, each impact tearing through stone and faith alike. The siege was no longer a battle. It was an autopsy. The city still breathed, but every breath was shallower than the last. By late May, the city had become a single wound, breathing smoke, praying through dust. The walls were broken in places, patched with timber and rubble. The great cannons had done their work, but what the iron couldn't destroy, time and hunger were finishing. Inside Constantinople, hope had turned brittle. Food was gone. Disease spread through the quarters. The bells that once rang for unity now tolled for funerals, and though the walls still stood, the people behind them were beginning to crack.
The walls may hold, but the trust within them has already crumbled.
In any siege, the first to collapse isn't the wall, it's trust. Rumors spread that Phoenician mercenaries were preparing to flee.
Greek commanders accused the Genos of sabotage. Every alliance forged in desperation now bent under suspicion.
Within the emperor's palace, a council convened, the last in Byzantine history. By torchlight, Emperor Constantine XI sat with his generals and priests, faces drawn by fatigue and resignation.
Following us.
Some urged surrender, others defiance. A few spoke of negotiation with Mehmed, but all knew the truth. Mercy would not come for a city that had defied destiny this long.
To surrender is not my right. We shall die here together.
Constantine II was not an emperor of wealth or conquest. He ruled over ruins, yet he refused to abandon them. To surrender the city is to surrender the faith. And that I will never do.
Outside the palace, the cracks deepened. Deserters began to slip through the walls under cover of night. Some citizens, desperate to survive, opened secret gates to the enemy scouts, tiny betrayals that became fractures in the defense. And on the 27th of May, a section of the inner wall near the gate of St. Romanus collapsed entirely. The city's heartbeat faltered.
Servant of God,
From his camp, Mehmed saw the breach and prepared for the final strike. Orders were sent to every corps. The great assault would begin before dawn on May 29th. He offered his troops 3 days of plunder if they succeeded. For the Sultan, it was the will of God. For the defenders, it was the apocalypse.
The night before the end, Constantinople gathered one last time inside Hagia Sophia. Orthodox and Catholic, soldier and civilian. Together at last, united not by doctrine, but by doom. It was the first and only time in 1,000 years that the divided church stood under one roof.
The emperor himself received communion alongside his men. He spoke softly, thanking those who had stood with him to the end, asking forgiveness from anyone he had wronged. Then he left the cathedral and disappeared into the darkness, armor polished, sword drawn, walking toward the wall. No one saw him again.
There are no records of his death, only stories. Some say he fell fighting in the breach.
Others say he tore off his insignia and vanished among the dead, choosing anonymity over surrender. Either way, his empire died with him.
As dawn broke, the final assault began. Waves of Ottoman soldiers stormed the shattered gate. Janissaries, engineers, and volunteers driven by faith and promise. The defenders, fewer than 1,000, fought with desperation that bordered on madness. Swords clashed in smoke and blood until the city's rhythm faltered, and the silence of conquest replaced the hymns of survival. When the walls finally fell, Constantinople didn't explode, it exhaled. 1,000 years of defiance ended in a single morning, and beyond the dust, Mehmed rode through the gate of St. Romanus, calm, unhurried, as if entering a place that had always been his. When the roar of the cannons finally stopped, the world seemed to hold its breath. The air hung heavy with smoke, ash, and the faint, unreal silence that always follows catastrophe. Constantinople, the city that had outlived empires, had fallen. And with it, the last chapter of Rome had closed.
For 3 days, chaos ruled. The ancient streets became rivers of dust. The victors poured through the gates, soldiers, scavengers, pilgrims of conquest, taking what the city had once guarded for a millennium.
Keep pushing! Burn it all down!
The Sultan had promised his army the spoils of victory, and they claimed them. Houses stripped bare, icons shattered, gold torn from sanctuaries. Even Hagia Sophia, once the grandest church in Christendom, became a scene of despair. Thousands sought refuge inside, praying for mercy. But the soldiers entered, and the prayers fell silent beneath the echoes of marching boots.
I'm scared, Mama.
It is said that when Mehmed finally entered the cathedral, the chaos stopped. He dismounted, stepped through the shattered doors, and gazed up at the dome that had once been gilded with sunlight. Then he ordered the prayer of thanksgiving to be said, not for victory alone, but for destiny fulfilled.
That moment, a young conqueror standing in the ruin of a civilization, marked the birth of something new. Mehmed ordered an immediate end to plunder. He declared that those who remained in the city would be protected. He called craftsmen, scholars, and merchants from every corner of his empire to repopulate the ashes.
Stand ready!
From the rubble rose Istanbul, a fusion of worlds. Churches became mosques, palaces became courts. The Byzantine past was not erased, but absorbed.
We must stabilize
The bones of Rome became the foundations of a new empire, Ottoman, Islamic, and modern.
Mehmed did not destroy Constantinople, he repurposed it. Where others saw ruins, he saw potential.
The same domes that once caught Christian prayers now echoed the call to prayer in Arabic. The same harbors that once carried Venetian merchants now launched Ottoman fleets.
Within a generation, the city transformed. Its markets bustled again. Its scholars filled new libraries. Its skyline shimmered with the crescents of rising mosques. The Suleymaniye, the Fatih, the future Blue Mosque yet to come. The empire that emerged from this ash would stretch across 3 continents and endure for nearly 500 years.
But every empire, even in victory, carries ghosts. Beneath Istanbul's streets lie the buried bones of Byzantium. Layers of faith, ambition, and memory, still whispering beneath the call to prayer. The conqueror and the conquered became one story, Degas.
One city with 2 souls.
By night, when the fires dimmed, Mehmed walked through the ruins alone. The legend says he stopped near the broken statue of Constantine the Great and murmured words from a Persian poet. The spider weaves the curtains in the palaces of Caesars. The owl calls the night watch in the towers of Afrasiab.
He understood then what every conqueror learns, that even triumph stands on borrowed time.
Empires fall, but the ideas they ignite never truly die. When Constantinople collapsed into smoke and silence, the world that rose from its ashes would never be the same.
The fall of the city was not the end of history. It was the hinge on which history turned.
For 1,000 years, Constantinople had been the wall between continents, faiths, and eras. Now that wall was gone, and with it, the map of the old world. To the Ottomans, it was triumph, the creation of a new imperial capital that would stand as the beating heart of an empire stretching across Europe, Asia, and Africa. Istanbul became the world's new crossroads, markets alive with languages from every shore, scholars from Persia debating with Greeks, and engineers sketching designs that would define the age of Islam's golden renaissance. But beyond its walls, in Europe, the shock was seismic. The fall of Constantinople sent a shiver through Christendom, a reminder that even the holiest cities could burn. The routes to the east, long controlled by Byzantium, were now under Ottoman command. Silk, spice, and scripture would flow through new hands, and that single shift of trade changed everything.
When the roads to the east closed, Europe turned to the sea. In the decades that followed, ships set sail from Portugal and Spain,
Not out of curiosity, but necessity. The fall of Constantinople had made the age of discovery inevitable.
The shock waves carried knowledge as well as fear. Greek scholars fleeing the ruins carried with them manuscripts, the preserved wisdom of antiquity. They crossed into Italy, into Florence and Venice, bringing with them Aristotle, Plato, and forgotten sciences. In those libraries and academies, the Renaissance was born, not from Europe's invention, but from Byzantium's survival.
In losing the city, the world rediscovered itself. Knowledge once sealed marble and mosaics found new life in printing presses and art studios. The flame that burned out in Hagia Sophia reignited in Da Vinci's sketches and Copernicus's stars.
And yet, the moral lesson lingered like a scar, that every civilization believes itself eternal until the moment it falls. The Byzantines had been confident, cultured, certain that their faith and fortifications would last forever. They were wrong. The Ottomans too would one day face their own twilight, because history, like empire, moves in circles, each fall feeding the rise of another.
The city that fell to the cannon gave birth to the telescope. The siege that silenced hymns made space for symphonies. And the conqueror who turned churches into mosques lit the path for explorers who would one day cross the ocean.
Constantinople's fall didn't mark the end of the medieval world. It marked the birth of the modern one. A new rhythm replaced the old, of trade and reason, invention and ambition, conquest and curiosity. Humanity, shaken by the echo of falling walls, began to ask the oldest question in a new way. If no city is eternal, what is? History remembers walls and kings, but what truly endures are the fires they leave behind. Constantinople burned, yet from its ashes, faith and knowledge crossed borders, oceans, and centuries. Its fall did not extinguish civilization, it scattered it into ships, libraries, and minds that would one day reshape the earth.
We like to imagine history as a ladder, one empire handing the torch to the next. But it isn't. It's a fire, unpredictable, consuming, and reborn in places no one expects.
The Ottomans inherited a city of ghosts and turned it into the pulse of an empire. The Byzantines, though conquered, lived on through the ideas they carried: mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, law, the scaffolding of the modern mind. The church that once sang in Greek now echoed in Arabic. The scripts changed, the faiths evolved, but the question remained the same.
What is eternal?
What is eternal, stone or spirit?
What is eternal, stone or spirit?
Every civilization believes its walls will stand forever. The Romans did, the Byzantines did, so did the Ottomans. But stone cracks, faith transforms, only ideas endure. The fall of Constantinople wasn't the end of an age. It was a mirror showing us that destruction and creation are not opposites, but partners. That every city that burns lights another somewhere else.
In the centuries that followed, Istanbul would become a symbol of continuity, a city that wore its history like armor, every conquest layered over another, every faith adding a verse to the same unbroken song. The mosaics of Byzantium still shimmer beneath Ottoman paint. The domes still catch sunlight where saints once stood. And in every echo of the call to prayer, there lingers a faint memory of ancient hymns.
Faith and fire. One builds, the other cleanses. Together, they shape the rhythm of humanity.
Constantinople taught us that no empire truly dies. It only changes hands, changes names.
In the end, no wall, no crown, no empire is forever. But the will to build, to believe, to begin again, that is what makes us human.